How is it possible that even though the congressional salary is $174,000 a year, all these lawmakers are worth millions of dollars? That's because they often make much more than that in the stock market. We just caught a new trade that might end up being a perfect example. Representative Byron Donald just filed a purchase of stock in a company called Marvel Technology, ticker symbol MRVL. For those who don't know, Marvel is a semiconductor company which designs custom chips used in AI data centers. The reason this stood out to me is because Byron Donald isn't just your average congressman. He just so happens to sit on the House Financial Services Subcommittee on AI, which happens to have jurisdiction over artificial intelligence and AI data centers. The trade that he just filed was made in early April, and Marvel stock has already risen 73% since then. We'll be keeping an eye on it to see if it continues to rise. If you want to see new trades by Congress before we report on them, check out the QuiverQuant mobile app.
All right, guys, how's it going? Happy Memorial Day. Good night, Chesty Puller, wherever you are. I am attorney Michael Eline, and I am a natural law attorney. As you guys know, this is the home of natural law and contrarian views. And today is Monday, May 25th. That's right, it's Memorial Day. And I appreciate all of you who are joining me today. And as most of you know, I became an attorney in the traditional way before we had the government-run schools and control over our mind, body, and soul, before the thought police, with help of large corporations, took control of our medical schools, law schools, and public education system. And we know that the bankers who actually helped fund all of this stuff, and the big corporations like the Rockefellers, brought the Prussian education system into the school to create a nation of workers and not of thinkers. Classical education was destroyed with the advent of the public school system. And so it's very difficult for we, the people, to get information. And obviously I'll be considered fringe and a crazy person, a conspiracy theorist, for actually bringing you the truth based on evidence. But I want you people today to understand that I am an attorney. I'm barred in California and Texas. And so I'm going to put Big Pharma on trial today as if I'm a prosecutor. And I'm going to apply loosely the California rules and Texas rules and jury instructions, evidence rules, jury instructions, et cetera, to put Big Pharma on trial, as well as the public education system, for what I believe the evidence will show is a grand conspiracy to make the American people stupid and enforce worldwide Bolshevism in order to strip we the people of their assets. And so court is now in session. We're going to talk about the Rockefeller takeover of natural healing, Prussian mines, the Tartarian reset, ancient alchemy, as well as the suppressed arks, a natural law trial presentation. And I'm going to go as long as I can. Unfortunately, I do have to work on cases because that's how I support my family. But before I start, if any of you have ever been involved in a serious motorcycle accident or a trip and fall or something like that, I do tort law. That's how I feed my family. Then I bring these videos to you free of charge in order to get out the word and help educate the people, because there's really no lawyers out there who have the intestinal fortitude to actually tell the truth. But I'm one of these guys. I'm a fighter and a patriot, and America first for me. So hopefully you'll enjoy the show and you'll enjoy the presentation. And the first thing that I'm going to start with is Mario over at Maneco 64. That's MANECO 64. Now, this guy, to me, is a visionary. He is a student and philosopher of the Austrian School of Economics, and he brings you contrarian views based upon Austrian economics and alternative economics. And I definitely want you. Shotgun Susie, so good to see you. I was afraid that I scared Shotgun Susie away because I was telling her that I was doing research on Gnostics, the Templars, and the Masons. And automatically, a lot of people assume that means that I'm a Mason or something. But no, I just want you guys to know that I don't believe in being a part of any secret societies I believe that anything secret is evil. However, I do believe there is lost knowledge that has been recorded in these ancient and secret societies, and any opportunity that I can get to bring that information out, I will. However, with a non-biased view towards finding the truth and encouraging you to be critical thinkers, and never accepting anything piecemeal like the public school children have been taught to believe. We have to question authority. We have to question their sources. We can never, ever be complacent in thinking that just because they have a piece of paper on their wall or a degree, that makes them some kind of an authority. It's up to you to do your own research and find out for yourself. So with that being said, let's get started with Mario. And again, I definitely recommend that you like and subscribe to Mario. At one point, I was going to have him on my show as a guest. I think I may have scared him away when I sent him a Twitter post that all rights come from God under natural law. And I had forgotten that Mario is from the Roman civil law democracy background. He's from, I believe he grew up in Brazil. So, but under American common law, all rights come from a creator. And the reason behind that, and I'm not a religious nut by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to discover. But I definitely, and hopefully Mario is watching this, my idea is that if your rights come from God and from a creator, they cannot be taken away from you by the state. And I think that was a very, very powerful thing that our founding fathers adopted from people like, I think, Aristotle and then John Locke, which was recorded throughout history, not starting with, but we had the Confirmatio Confirmatum, we had the Magna Carta, and these were all documents basically saying, no, king, you don't have divine right other than the rights that God gave you, and we the people also are God's creation. And any rights that we're born with are natural law rights, including the right of life, liberty, the pursuit of property, happiness, the right of self-defense. So hopefully you guys can get Mario to watch this video so he'll get a better idea of why I support natural law rights and why I think it's dangerous to not think and to not support the concept that our rights come from a creator. But let's go ahead and give Mario a chance to speak, because we're going to talk about how politicians on both sides of the fence, but primarily the left modernly, push socialism as a way to slowly strip us of our assets. And you can learn more about that in Bolshevism. And in fact, American bankers actually funded the Bolshevik Revolution. The Rothschilds have benefited from funding both sides of wars throughout history. And so nothing has really changed. And so that's one of the reasons why I did research on the Templars, because I found out that they, based on one of their grand masters, that they never really considered themselves to be Catholics. And basically their view is that the Roman Catholic Church is basically Rome, and Rome never changed. And they replaced all of the Christian holidays with Roman holidays, or they made Christian holy days into Roman holidays, and they kept the same dates. And they removed several books from the Bible that went against their view of history and government control. And that's really what it was all about. And ultimately, it appears as though the Catholic banks and the Templar banks became to a loggerhead, and the Catholics ended up executing their Grand Master on Friday the 13th, which is a famous day. I'm not going to get into the total history, but let's let Mario talk about the Fabians, and then we'll get into the show. We'll talk about the takeover of natural healing and petroleum-based medicine, because so many college kids, they're so brainwashed to believe anything their professor says. As long as you have a degree on the wall, that makes you smart. That makes you the authority. We're going to talk about petroleum-based medicine. And yes, it is true. Our modern medicine comes from petroleum products that could be synthesized from natural remedies into patentable medical products. And of course, when you can pay off all these politicians, like we showed at the very beginning, they're never going to vote to bring back apothecary and different types of medicines that were natural. For thousands of years, we had natural medicine. For thousands of years, we had men being hunters and providers, and the women protecting the children. And they pushed this new sort of cult that men are women, women are men, that the only real medicine is the petroleum-based medicine. that we don't need silver and gold, that fiat currency, which Voltaire said eventually will turn to its intrinsic value, which is zero, are really what matter. And anybody who goes against that needs to have their social media accounts censored. They need to be silenced. They need to have their YouTube channels, algorithms silenced and throttled. So please give me a bunch of ones, because who knows what's going to happen if the so-called fact checkers disagree with my presentation from an unbiased point of view as a trial lawyer, putting Big Pharma on trial. Let's see what happens today. But yes, Shotgun Susie, I definitely want to learn more about that. So the goal here, guys, is exploration and education outside the modern corporate monopoly of the education system and medical schools, the pharmacy schools, the American Medical Association. I mean, you can't even get a medical degree anymore in homeopathy. It's just gone. It's been erased. And we're going to get into all that and where modern medicine comes from. And we're even going to talk about the healing powers of gold and silver and the ability to generate electricity. We're going to even get into some stuff that might be a little bit on the fringe, from one of these Templar guys talking about how ancient arcs were really a method of free electricity. We're going to talk about that. So it's going to be really fun, and hopefully you guys will like it. And again, I want to encourage you to do your own research. By no means do I ever want you to take anything I say as truth, because I want people to think. I don't want people to think like me. The goal here today is to encourage critical thinking. Okay, so let's let Mario talk a little bit about what he's got to say, and then we'll get into the show.
Wrap up with socialism. Yeah. So what is this? Well, this is a conservative party, British Conservative Party propaganda slogan from the early 20th century. And it's a particular anti-socialist set of campaigns they had. And it referred to the belief that socialist policies were strangling or suffocating the economy, private enterprise, and individual freedom. And so this is one of the posters they had, and I bought this actually at Peter Morris, coins and metals and antiquities dealer in Bromley. I was there on Saturday. He sells all kinds of stuff. And yeah, socialism is throttling the country, and they've got Britannia, and she's wearing a waistband that says prosperity. And this was around the same period where the Labour Party was created, where the Fabians started out, the Fabian Society. The Fabians, of course, their philosophy is to bring in socialism and world government very gradually. Their symbol is like a turtle. The turtle moves very slowly, and Fabian, I think, was a Roman general who had the same kind of strategy during wars. And Tony Blair is a Fabian. It doesn't surprise me, of course. The London School of Economics, where a lot of these policymakers and central bankers went to school. Well, that was an institution created by the Fabians. Rachel Reeves went to the London School of Economics. Paul Volcker attended the London School of Economics. Yes, he's head of the Fed.
That's right.
Went to London and went to the London School of Economics. And yes, they do it gradually. And
so you can see what Mario's talking about is the Fabians, the Fabian societies. And basically, it doesn't matter what political party you're a part of, which is where I agree with Chile de Castro over at Delete Laws, that the actual politicians, there really is no difference, but the people who support the politicians definitely have their own viewpoints. Unfortunately, the public education system has brainwashed a whole generation of children into thinking socialism is good, and stripping your neighbor of their assets somehow will create what they call social justice. But ultimately, what it leads to is the stripping away of your property. And the basis of the United States of America, notice I don't say the U.S., Washington, D.C., 10 miles square, was life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Actually, it was called happiness, but it was stolen from John Locke by Thomas Jefferson and other visionaries in our country. And by the way, we're going to talk about Dr. Benjamin Rush, the only physician who was actually one of our founding fathers and signers of the Declaration of Independence, as we go through this jury trial today. But just so you see, the Fabians really have control over the political system to a large degree, at least that philosophy, especially the private, secretly run Federal Reserve Bank that the Supreme Court somehow declared to be a quasi-public, quasi-private agency. Well, I've got news for you. There is no provision in the Constitution for such a monstrosity or institution to exist. But when the schools, the colleges, have their secret societies, Skull and Bones or whatever, and all the politicians and judges come from these organizations, what do you think is going to happen? I want to know what you have to say in the comments. So let's let Mario finish.
Even the Conservative Party now, if you told someone from the early 1900s what the Conservative Party stands for, the policies that they enact, they would say, well, that's the Labour Party. So why am I talking about this? Well, because right now, the UK tax stake is around 35 to 37% of GDP.
It's ridiculous.
And yes, the broader trend is that Britain's tax burden is now at or close to the highest level since World War II.
And it doesn't help that Britain allows illegal aliens to flood into their country, the vast majority of whom immediately go on welfare and have babies, right? And they're going to be voting for the political class who gives them free stuff. So ultimately, my belief is, like the Fabians or Fabians, like these societies, I believe to be secret societies to a large degree. At least there are meetings like the Warburgs, for example. I believe their goal is to recreate a noble class and a wealthy class where they control all of the serfs, and they do that by importing low IQ people into their country from places like sub-Saharan Africa, the lowest IQ in the world, where they're easier to control because they're incapable of critical thinking. And in that way, they can replace the critical thinkers in their countries who don't want this type of thing to happen by use of democracy, which is where 51% of the population can steal and destroy the rights of the 49%. And that's why our founding fathers wanted America to be a constitutional republic, not a democracy, where the government was bound by the chains of the Constitution. So let's get into the show now. Let's get into the case in chief. Strike that. So again, we're going to present this as if we're on trial. We're putting Big Pharma and the Rockefellers on trial today. And we're going to start with the Flexner Report, with the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and their takeover of the medical schools and traditional medicine. So, ladies and gentlemen of the YouTube jury, court is now in session. I am natural law attorney Michael Eline, and I appear before you today as the prosecutor in this criminal trial of the people versus the engineered medical monopoly. Seated at the defense table are the FDA, the CDC, and the institutional forces that still proclaim, quote, only FDA approved is legitimate medicine. Everything else is dangerous quackery. The evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that centuries of natural healing wisdom rooted in ancient traditions was deliberately destroyed by the Rockefeller interests and allies through the 1910 Flexner Report and the importation of the Prussian education models designed to produce generations of non-critical thinkers. We will further examine the Tartarian civilization's advanced knowledge, the suppression of alchemical healing in monoatomic gold and colloidal silver, and a host of lost technologies with ancient arks. We begin with the founding vision that was betrayed. And we're going to use the rules of evidence and objections in this trial under Texas rules of evidence and the California Evidence Code. And because of that, all exhibits must be relevant. Okay, so I'm going to lay a foundation for you the way that an attorney would. Texas Rule of Evidence 401 and California Evidence Code Section 210, basically that all these exhibits and their probative value must not be substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice. Texas Rule of Evidence 403 and California Evidence Code Sections 352. The defense will repeatedly object on hearsay grounds, out-of-court statements offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. I anticipate and will overcome these objections as follows. The public records exception. The Flexner Report and government medical histories qualify under Texas Rules of Evidence 803 sub 8 and California Evidence Code Section 1280 as official records. I'm also going to use the ancient documents exception. Documents 20 plus years old under Texas Rules of Evidence 803 sub 16 or 30 plus years old under California Evidence Code Section 1331. And I'm going to establish their authenticity as admissible. The 1910 Flexner Report and Egyptian alchemical texts easily qualify. Additional exceptions include the business records exceptions under Texas Rules of Evidence 803 sub 6, learned treatises, and residual trustworthiness exceptions. And I'm also going to argue that the court needs to take judicial notice of publicly published news articles and events in the news that can be backed by history. The jury instructions that we're going to use today, because you're my jury today, and let me make sure people are still here in the show, because sometimes I get knocked offline as soon as it starts getting good. It looks like everybody's here. Yeah. And by the way, I want to thank everybody for joining me, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I want to thank Sterling Cannabis for taking the time out of his day to join me, as well as Shotgun Susie, Boru 1326, John Wesley 256, Selwindon, my homeboy Selwindon, one of my moderators to keep you all in check. Hockaloogie, good seeing you, Hockaloogie. Glad you made it back. Hockaloogie called me out the other day for posting something that didn't pass fact check on my YouTube community channel, and I deleted it, but he unfollowed me. He unsubscribed to me and gave me a warning. Don't be posting bullshit, because when I share this stuff, it's going to make both of us look bad. And obviously, being a critical thinker, rather than argue and try to get into a flaming war with someone who's right, it's better to just let people be right when they're right. And so that's what I try to do on this channel as well. So anything that I share with you today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I definitely want to find out if there's anything that you disagree with, if there's anything that you feel is far-fetched or not true, because that's the way we roll on my channel. It's all about open discourse and helping each other learn, because like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. The way we improve is not to argue with each other, but to put both of our points across and learn from one another. That's called critical thinking, something that was lost in the corporate takeover of our public education system. So you're going to be the sole judge of the facts today. The prosecution needs to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt. That is to a moral certainty, leaving you with an abiding conviction of the truth of the charge. A reasonable doubt is one that is not a mere possible doubt, because everything relating to human affairs is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. It is the state of the case which, after the entire comparison and consideration of all the evidence, leaves the minds of the jurors in that condition that they cannot say they feel an abiding conviction of the truth of the charge. Natural law demands both bodily autonomy and informed consent. So the landscape before 1910, freedom and healing, and the foundation vision is what we're going to talk about next. Before the Flexner Report, American medicine was pluralistic and patient-centered. Herbal remedies, homeopathy, naturopathy or naturopathy, hydrotherapy, nutrition, and eclectic practices thrived. Medical schools taught botanical medicine. Doctors strengthened the body's innate healing power through diet, clean water, and lifestyle, not patentable synthetics. These natural methods were affordable and unpatentable. And that's where this gets important, because you're going to find out that all of the waste products from petroleum, Rockefeller needed to find a way to sell them and market them. And we're going to figure out how he did that later on in the show. This freedom aligned with the vision of Dr. Benjamin Rush, the only physician to sign the Declaration of Independence, and a true founding father. Rush advocated for medical freedom to be explicitly protected in the Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. He warned that without it, medicine would organize into an undercover dictatorship, and many would say we saw that happen recently. Many critical thinkers who didn't go along with what they were told to think by CNN understand exactly what I'm talking about, right? And he argued that it would restrict the art of healing and create tyranny over the body. Tyranny over the body. Had medical freedom been enshrined as Rush urged, the Rockefeller Flexner takeover would have been constitutionally impossible. State licensing boards could not have shut down natural healing schools en masse. The AMA could not have become a de facto enforcer, and courts would have struck down the efforts to criminalize non-patentable traditional modalities. The entire petroleum-based pharma monopoly would have collapsed under the weight of the Constitution's protection of individual liberty and healing. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you is some evidence, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Let's go ahead and take a look, and I'll let you decide.
Before 1910, American medicine looked completely different. Herbal remedies shared shelves with patent medicines. Homeopaths, naturopaths, and eclectic physicians practiced alongside conventional doctors. Medical schools taught botanical medicine, hydrotherapy, and nutrition-based therapies that had been used for generations. There was no single authority dictating legitimacy. Patients had choices. Doctors had freedom to treat with what worked. John D. Rockefeller surveyed this landscape and saw inefficiency. More importantly, he saw opportunity. By 1900, Rockefeller had already monopolized oil refining through Standard Oil. His company controlled 90% of American oil production, but refining crude oil produced waste byproducts: benzene, toluene, phenol, millions of gallons, with no commercial use. Rockefeller was paying to dispose of them. Then came the insight that would change everything. These chemical wastes could form the basis for synthetic drugs. Aspirin had recently been synthesized from coal, a similar petroleum byproduct. If pharmaceutical compounds could be derived from oil waste, Rockefeller could turn a disposal problem into a profit center. But natural medicine was an obstacle: affordable, accessible, outside anyone's control. It couldn't be patented. Nutrition, herbs, hydrotherapy, they threatened profit.
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you saw my discussion earlier where we talked about traditional healing methods. And as you can see, based on this video, he's pretty well covered that for thousands of years, and still in China, luckily, they still have their herbologists and natural healing. And you'll notice that Asians tend to be leaner. They tend not to suffer from the same rates of cancer. And it would make sense. I mean, when you're synthesizing something that's natural out of oil-based products, I think that the evidence could potentially show that that could cause side effects. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree.
Rockefeller's solution was elegant: redefine what counted as legitimate medicine, eliminate the competition, and capture the entire market. All he needed was credibility. In 1901, Rockefeller founded the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. The name alone carried weight. By 1907, he invested heavily in drug manufacturing through partnerships with German chemical companies. IG Farben, the German giant that would later produce Cyclone B for Nazi concentration camps, became a key collaborator. They had mastered transforming coal and dye derivatives into pharmaceutical compounds. Rockefeller saw the same could be done with petroleum byproducts. Together, they built a pharmaceutical industry centered on synthetic, patentable compounds, monopolized and sold at premium prices. Manufacturing drugs wasn't enough. Medical schools still taught natural methods. Doctors still prescribed herbs. Rockefeller needed control of medical education itself. Enter Abraham Flexner, an
Here we
educator
go.
with no
Flexner
medical
Report.
background. In 1910, commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation and funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, Flexner visited 155 schools across the United States and Canada. His report condemned homeopathy, naturopathy, and eclectic medicine, praising only institutions focused on laboratory science, drug-based treatments, and standardized curricula.
There you go. Standardized curricula. That's always the way they do it, right? Standardized curricula is the key to this whole deal. So what I'm going to do next is just share with you a little bit about Dr. Benjamin Rush. Let me try to get us there. All right, here we go. Let's learn a little bit about Dr. Rush really quickly, privates. Let's see. This was at, just give me a second, guys. I'm trying to pull up the Dr. Benjamin Rush. All right, here we go. Notice how they have to put a disclaimer because they don't want to risk getting their channel banned. That's how powerful the pharmaceutical industry is. Imagine, even if they're giving money to all these people, these big corporations and advertising, do you think these corporations are going to allow the truth? I want to know what you think.
Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Joseph J. Ellis will be here to tell us about his newest book, American Dialogue, The Founding Fathers and Us. Ellis gives us a deeply insightful examination of the relevance of the views of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and John Adams to some of the most divisive issues in America today. A book signing follows that program. And on Thursday at 7 p.m., we honor the bicentennial of the birth of Frederick Douglass with a panel discussion on Frederick Douglass, 19th century civil rights activist, his legacy today. Douglass himself, portrayed by William.
All right, let's move it forward here.
Revolutionary era, an eminent
Dr.
doctor,
Rush.
a social reformer, and a valued correspondent of the great names of his time. Today's guest author turns our attention to this forgotten founding father who rightfully deserves the spotlight. Among the many sources cited in the book's bibliography is an immensely valuable website, Founders Online. Through Founders Online, which is hosted by the National Archives, through the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, we can meet the nation's
Dr.
founders
Benjamin
through their
Rush,
own words.
the only
Among the
doctor who was
thousands
a
of
signer of the
documents,
Declaration
you
of
can find
Independence.
more than 400 letters between Benjamin Rush and Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Franklin, and others. Thanks to Mr. Unger, we can rediscover the words and works of Dr. Benjamin Rush and his place in the story of this nation's founding. Historian Harlow Giles Unger is the author of more than 25 books, including
We'll move
more
it
than a
forward. I
dozen
just want you to get an
biographies of our
understanding of who
founding
Rush is. Let's try to get it forward.
Founding fathers, in many ways the most important. George Washington was unquestionably the father of our political and military structure, and Alexander Hamilton fathered our economic structure. But it was Dr. Benjamin Rush who fathered our social structure. It was Dr. Benjamin Rush who took the words of our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and translated them into significant social progress. Few of our other founding fathers really believed those words. Many of them owned slaves, and all of them believed they owned their wives and children. Dr. Benjamin Rush was our first and only great humanitarian. He was the only doctor with a medical school degree who signed the Declaration of Independence. And with his signature, he began a lifelong struggle for abolition of slavery, for women's rights, for a ban on child labor. He fought for establishment of universal free public education, universal health care, medical care of wounded troops, prison reform, and an end to forced labor. I didn't know this until a few weeks ago. 22 states allow forced labor. They all have laws that ban slavery except for convicts. And
all right, so that just was a little bit about Dr. Rush. Now, with respect to this speaker, I do take exception to a lot of the things that he says about free this and free that, because free means that you steal from your neighbor in order to pay for the things that you want. My understanding of Benjamin Rush is that he did not advocate for government control over much of anything. In fact, my view of Dr. Rush is that he understood the concept of natural law, in that your property is your own, and that a direct tax on labor is theft, and that the concept behind universal health care is to get the government out of health care completely to where it's super and highly affordable. And I believe that based on the time and the era that our founders lived in, that it was the church's job and it was charity's job to make sure that these things could be done. And if we didn't have patents and all these billions of dollars worth of approval needed by the American Medical Association, the FDA, and the CDC, that affording healthcare would be affordable. So that's my view on it. Tell me what you think. I'd like to hear your point of view. Now, we're going to do one more video, just a really quick reaction video, to learn about what Rockefeller saw and how Rockefeller took advantage of what was happening. And notice that this happened right around the time of the creation of the private, secretly run Federal Reserve Bank. Remember, these large corporations love centralized control. They push socialism. They push central control. And again, bankers actually helped fund the Bolshevik Revolution. Why is that? Because they want to strip you of your property rights. It's nothing less than a controlled demolition of your private property rights in order to force global, worldwide communism, socialism, where you will own nothing and be happy. And so let's get into it.
Inefficiency. More importantly, he saw opportunity. By 1900, Rockefeller had already monopolized oil refining through Standard Oil. His company controlled 90% of American oil production, but refining crude oil produced waste byproducts, benzene, toluene, phenol, millions of gallons, with no commercial use. Rockefeller was paying to dispose of them. Then came the insight that would change everything. These chemical wastes could form the basis for synthetic drugs. Aspirin had recently been synthesized from coal, a similar petroleum byproduct. If pharmaceutical compounds could be derived from oil waste, Rockefeller could turn a disposal problem into a profit center. But natural medicine was an obstacle, affordable, accessible, outside anyone's control. It couldn't be patented. Nutrition, herbs, hydrotherapy, they threatened profit. Rockefeller's solution was elegant. Redefine what counted as legitimate medicine, eliminate the competition, and capture the entire market. All he needed was credibility. In 1901, Rockefeller founded the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. The name alone carried weight. By 1907, he invested heavily in drug.
So we actually covered this already. Let me just sorry, when I get away from the microphone, I know you guys don't hear me. So what I've got is I've got my Prezo screen to the left of me, and then I've got my viewing screen to the front of me. So every time I turn my head away, I know I kind of lose a little bit of the sound. But hopefully you guys are having a good time. By the way, happy Memorial Day, everyone, if I didn't already say that. Good night, Chesty Puller, wherever you are. And good night, Paul Eline, wherever you are. My father died from Agent Orange from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Remember when the government said that Agent Orange is safe and effective? It'll just help strip away the jungles from around the fire bases to protect our servicemen. Totally safe and effective, nothing to worry about. And of course, if you question that, you would be considered a racist or, whatever. They always want to label people who disagree with their government opinions, right? They always want to put you in a box, call you a conspiracy theorist. But now we know, yes, Agent Orange causes cancer. So Yeah, pretty sad. So let's get into the next part of this jury trial. Rockefeller's motive, European discovery, petroleum waste and patentable drugs, and the shift to central control. And this is always a theme we're going to see with politicians, corporations, is central control. They don't want you to have options. This is another reason why I believe that they have a war against the Amish. They want to destroy the Amish. They're going after their dairy farms, raw milk, even though we know raw milk has cholesterol. We know that heating the milk takes away a lot of its healing properties. In fact, well, we'll talk about it. Colloidal silver. They don't want you to use colloidal silver. They call you a quack if you do, but for thousands of years, silver was used as an antibacterial. You could throw a silver coin in your milk to keep it fresher for longer without heating it up and killing a lot of the cursive, teaching you that math is racist, right? The kids won't have access to this information. They'll just believe anything that Grok or ChatGPT tells them. And this is another reason why, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm a proponent and an advocate of homeschooling. Homeschool your kids. Get them out of the government-run education system so they can learn classical education and critical thinking. So let's get into, let me fix the screen really quick. Let me get back to you. All right. And let's get into all right, so we got this one going. All right. A European scientific breakthrough revealed that petroleum waste byproducts, benzene, phenol, coal, and tar derivatives, as well as other petrochemicals, could be used to synthesize patentable versions of natural cures. Scientists in the late 19th and 20th centuries and the early 20th centuries, particularly in Germany and Switzerland, discovered they could create synthetic vitamins like vitamin C in 1935 and drugs from oil waste. John D. Rockefeller, controlling 90% of U.S. refineries through Standard Oil, seized this as an opportunity. He partnered with German chemical giants like IG Farben and built a drug manufacturing empire on these cheap, patentable synthetics. The goal of this modern pharmaceutical system was never primarily to heal. It was central control. Synthetic patentable drugs created lifelong customers dependent on symptom management rather than root cause healing through natural vitality. This model aligned perfectly with the broader agenda of international bankers, including those behind the Federal Reserve, which was established in 1913, who sought a controlled population. A healthy, independent, critically thinking populace always threatens centralized power. And you see this on the colleges, right? If you don't go along with their trans agenda and all, the rainbow flag mafia, you're automatically a bigot or a homophobe, and you're basically treated as a pariah. They don't encourage critical thinking. It's groupthink, and that's what the public schools and the colleges do. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. Give me a bunch of twos if you disagree. This is just my observation using my ability to be a critical thinker. This central control extends to the controlled demolition of private property rights. And to learn more about that, I recommend you go to The Market Sniper. That's Francis over at The Market Sniper. If you want to learn about the controlled demolition of private property rights and assets, hard assets, how the government wants to strip us of all of our hard assets. By engineering dependency on state-approved medicine, education, and finance, the system weakens individual sovereignty and paves the way for greater government and corporate dominance over personal assets, land, and bodily autonomy. U.S. bankers played a key role in one of history's greatest transfers of private wealth, the Bolshevik Revolution. Figures tied to Wall Street, like Kuhn Loeb, Jacob Schiff, and Federal Reserve connected interests, provided substantial funding to Lenin and Trotsky. This financed the overthrow of private property in Russia, consolidating wealth and power and a centralized regime. a blueprint that echoes the control mechanisms that we see today. So let me really quickly make sure I've got the next video up on the screen for you. Hold on one second, guys. So look, I'm not a pro at this, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, so I'm just trying to find the next link for you. So just follow along with me as I try to find this stuff. All right, so this was, by the way, what do you guys think so far? I'll take a little break here once I get to this next section to take questions before we move forward. I know I saw some questions pop up. Okay. So let's get into the next one.
Importantly, he saw.
And I think I showed you this one, so hold on one second. All right, so let me get into any questions that you guys might have. Hold on one second. All right, so now Shotgun Susie says fluoride is sludge from aluminum manufacturing, so they poison us and charge us for their waste disposal. You know, I saw recently that that's been exposed, and I don't use fluoride toothpaste. I use a powder that has baking soda and minerals. They call it mineralized toothpaste. If anybody wants to know about that, just send me a link and I'll send you how I find that stuff. But I haven't had a cavity in like 20 years. I stay away from sugar. I go to the gym. I try to stay in shape, stay off of pharmaceuticals, and I basically just try and get herbs and things like that, which is what petroleum medicine was synthesized from. But I try to get the stuff from the actual plants. So Michael Wilbur says they stripped us of property if you don't pay your taxes. Well, they do that as well, that's for sure. And thank you, Michael Wilbur. Hey, Jody. Yeah. So Jody Shiloh, guys, give me a bunch of ones for Jody. She's been with me for a couple of years. A really awesome mom. She supports homeschooling. And I just love most of my audience because they understand natural law, forming parallel systems, even if we don't always agree with each other on everything. The key thing is that we form private trading groups, that we collect gold and silver, ammo, food, right? Because you never know when the thought police are just going to go to a CBDC and then let the electric grid go down and then just let us starve to death. And I wouldn't put that past them for a minute. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. All right, so let's get into the next video. You may have already seen this one, but let's let it play.
Together, they built a pharmaceutical industry centered on synthetic, patentable compounds, monopolized and sold at premium prices. Manufacturing drugs wasn't enough. Medical schools still taught natural methods. Doctors still prescribed herbs. Rockefeller needed control of medical education itself. Enter Abraham Flexner, an educator with no medical background. In 1910, commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation and funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, Flexner visited 155 schools across the United States and Canada. His report condemned homeopathy, naturopathy, and eclectic medicine, praising only institutions focused on laboratory science, drug-based treatments, and standardized curricula. The report recommended shutting half of all medical schools immediately. Schools teaching natural medicine lost accreditation. Without accreditation, graduates couldn't be licensed. Without licenses, they couldn't practice. State medical board.
Now, we also saw that during the what many people call the pandemic, that doctors who spoke out against mRNA technology and experimental drugs, they were immediately sent to the American Medical Board licensing boards, threatened to have their medical licenses taken away. It was a big deal. It really exposed how deep the corporate control of modern medicine has gone. I mean, after all, when Rockefeller Evolved Education controls all the boards and all the schools, they control the curriculum and they control the media. they control the information, and control of information is key here. So if you've had a chance to read the Twitter files, you'll see how that was done really starting under Biden, where former CIA and FBI employees got jobs working for Twitter, and they used their connections at the FBI and CIA and other drug enforcement administrations to use influence to have people's social media accounts banned and throttled. And so that's the other problem, is the government doesn't want critical thinkers. They do not want that. That's the biggest danger to a powerful central government. And that's why I'm an anti-federalist, why I believe that everything should be decided at the local level to large degree. Okay, give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. So let's, so the next thing we're going to talk about is so we talked about the Bolshevik Revolution being funded by American bankers. Let's talk about the Flexner Report. Okay, and by the way, these links are included in the description. And if there's anything missing, reach out to me on my main channel and I will get you this information. In 1910, notice it's just 3 years before the creation of the Federal Reserve banking system. So you can see the frog is starting to slowly boil, or in this case, the turtle is slowly starting to become stronger, right? Just like Mario Maneko64 talked about at the beginning of this video. In 1910, Abraham Flexner, a non-physician, just like Bill Gates, but we're taught by the media that they're some kind of visionaries, right? Oh, Gates is awesome, right? Even though he's not a medical doctor, because it's the narrative put out by the corporate controlled media, right? Controlled narrative, that's really all it is. So the Flexner, Abraham Flexner was funded by Carnegie and Rockefeller. And again, he inspected 155 medical schools. His report labeled homeopathy, naturopathy, and botanical medicine as quackery, endorsing only lab-based, generic, drug-centric German models, very similar to how they imported the Prussian model, which is obviously a Germanic country, the Prussian education system from Prussia. And Rockefeller used grants to create the modern public education system, which is nothing more, in my opinion, than a prison where you create non-critical thinkers. So medical schools dropped from 160 to 85. Homeopathic colleges nearly vanished. Surviving schools, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, received further Rockefeller millions and shifted into synthetics. See how money does that, guys? Even though it wasn't, well, it was kind of money. At least we had silverbacks and goldbacks at that point. Nutrition and prevention largely disappeared. So let's take a look at the Flexner impact. Let me see if I can find that video. Let's see if this is the one. Give me a second, guys. And here we go, the Flexner impact.
Medical schools still taught natural methods. Doctors still prescribed herbs. Rockefeller needed control of medical education itself. Enter Abraham Flexner, an educator with no medical background. In 1910, commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation and funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, Flexner visited 155 schools across the United States and Canada. His report condemned homeopathy, naturopathy, and eclectic medicine, praising only institutions focused on laboratory science, drug-based treatments, and standardized curricula. The report recommended shutting half of all medical schools immediately. Schools teaching natural medicine lost accreditation. Without accreditation, graduates couldn't be licensed. Without licenses, they couldn't practice. State medical boards rewrote requirements to exclude non-pharmaceutical graduates. Within 15 years, the number of American medical schools dropped from 160 to 85. Homeopathic schools nearly vanished. Only 2 remained by 1923. Eclectic and naturopathic schools suffered the same fate. The survivors were the ones that accepted Rockefeller funding. Yale, Harvard, Johns Hopkins all received millions. These institutions restructured programs to emphasize pharmaceutical treatments. Courses in botanical medicine, nutrition, and prevention disappeared. The new curriculum treated the human body like a machine. When something broke, you didn't change the fuel or environment. You added chemicals to override symptoms.
And we see that modernly. I mean, you go to the doctor and you're 500 pounds overweight, and what do? They give you blood pressure medicine. They don't even really focus on nutrition, right? And in my personal view is that 90% of the problems with the human body can be controlled with proper nutrition and exercise. We didn't see any of these major diseases like this, in my view, until we started treating symptoms instead of trying to cure the problem. So give me a bunch of ones if you agree. So let's talk about the, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's talk about the Tartarian context. And of course, this is a little fringe, but Tartaria was on maps in the 1800s and 1900s. And just like our medicine was evaporated from our curriculum, we had, well, let's talk about Prussian education first. But Tartaria is important because it shows a pattern in practice of erasing history and replacing it with a corporate monopoly control of history. So the Prussian education importation, the manufacturing of non-critical thinkers, this is the next thing we're going to talk about. This is really important. This is really important, guys. So you can see up on the screen, I've got a Wikipedia article about the Prussian education system. This is literally the roadmap for America's modern public education system, where Rockefeller got rid of classical education and replaced the public education system through grants by giving out money again to build schools, to introduce this great curriculum. And a little bit of the history behind this, the King of Prussia was defeated by Napoleon, and his soldiers mutinied and they turned on their officers. And in order for Prussia, which is now considered to be the most militant and disciplined of all of the historical armies, in order for him to circumvent this, he needed an education system that would create absolute obedience to the government narrative. And Rockefeller liked this, again, because he was a monopolist and he didn't believe in individual rights, right? He did not, neither did the Carnegies. So Rockefeller imported the Prussian education system, and it's a parallel to the medical capture. America imported this system in the 19th century and used this education model via Horace Mann and Rockefeller's General Education Board. And it was designed for obedience and rote learning, rote memorization, not critical thought. It produced compliant citizens who defer to authority. Doctor knows best. Only FDA approved is real. And you'll hear this with the young kids, the millennials, right? The younger generation who go to the public schools and the colleges. They come out, and if you even say anything bad about any of these synthetic drugs, automatically you're a fringe conspiracy theorist and you need to be silenced. You know, not only are you that, they want to silence you. And they have their own enforcement branch, Antifa, right? They have their own version of the German SA from the 1920s and 30s, where they'll go and try and harass and terrorize you and your family. And we know that that funding, to a large degree, comes from countries like communist China, and we'll go over that in another video. But it's pretty bad, and it's only going to get worse unless we, the people, do something about it. So now let's get into the Tartarian context, the suppressed advanced civilization, and we're going to talk about the Great Reset. So let's talk about it because it's worth talking about. And then again, I want you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to be the ultimate arbiters of understanding the law and the facts in this case. Not the actual judge appointed by the state. We're going to allow you to do that because we believe in jury nullification on my channel, just like Thomas Jefferson did. So let's go ahead and listen to what this gentleman has to say about Tartaria really quickly. And I included the links for you to watch these videos on your own.
Counting expired coupons. Architectural anomalies and the mud flood hypothesis. Across the world, we find architectural marvels that seem to defy the technological capabilities of their purported time periods. grand structures with intricate designs, massive domes and towering spires. Some proponents of the Tartaria theory suggest that these buildings are remnants of the lost empire. A key component of this theory is the mud flood hypothesis. Adherents claim that a catastrophic mud flood event occurring in the relatively recent past buried cities and civilizations. They point to buildings with submerged lower levels or windows at ground level as evidence. According to this narrative, the Tartarian Empire was decimated by this mud flood, leading to its erasure from history. Critics argue that these architectural features can be explained by changes in urban planning, road elevations, or architectural styles over time. They also highlight the lack of geological evidence supporting a global mud flood event in recent history. Mud floods burying entire civilizations sounds like Mother Nature had a serious grudge, but let's think about it. Cities evolve, streets get raised, buildings get renovated. Ever walk into an old building and had to step down a few stairs? That doesn't mean it survived a biblical mudslide. Maybe they just built the street higher later on, or perhaps the architects had a thing for sunken living rooms. The World's Fairs and the alleged Tartarian architecture. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw grand expositions like the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago and the 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco. These fairs showcased grandiose buildings with elaborate designs, often constructed rapidly and intended as temporary structures. Some theorists claim that these expositions were not merely celebrations of progress.
So in essence, what many people claim is that these were pre-existing structures, that there's no way they could have been built in the time that it was said that they were built, and that our civilization was built on top of Tartaria. And Tartaria was into alchemy and natural healing and things of that nature. And you can see back then they didn't have social media. They didn't have the internet. It was, and right now the government doesn't have total control over all this information yet, but they will with AI. But you could see how easily that history could be easily buried by the state, by the government. Many people believe that ancient kings and queens needed to erase the map of Tartaria because there was the law of property. And you couldn't just go and claim someone's property unless it was through war. And there had to be a declaration of war. And we'll get into the common law as well as the Roman civil law understanding of how that was done. But when you just go and claim someone's property without some kind of a hostility, there's no legal title or entitlement to that. So if you just erase that from a map and you erase that from history and the people never know about it, then it's accepted. And through custom and practice, I believe it's after 100 years, it becomes law. So that is one of the ways that the governments were able to steal people's property back then. So let's get into this next. Well, let me make sure this isn't the same video. Yeah, these are both the same. These are both the same. All right. So what I'll try to do is do this short for you to give you a quick understanding. It's only 5 minutes. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it rip, and I'm going to let you guys decide for yourself.
Leaves behind ruins, legends, and scars upon the earth. But what happens when the end of a civilization is not simply the slow march of time, but a sudden, worldwide catastrophe? Many researchers believe that Tartaria did not merely vanish into the pages of rewritten history. It was deliberately erased during a global event known as the Great Reset. The phrase Great Reset may sound modern, but the idea is far older. In the 18th and 19th centuries, strange disasters swept across cities worldwide. Floods, fires, earthquakes, and what some call mud floods. Entire buildings were buried overnight, their lower floors swallowed by earth, their windows sealed beneath layers of mud. The signs are still visible today. In cities across Russia, Europe, and even North America, countless buildings appear half-sunken, their first floors buried below ground level. Official history explains this as poor city planning, raised streets, or natural disasters. But could all of these cases, spread across continents, be mere coincidence? Take St. Petersburg, for example. The city's grand palaces and cathedrals often reveal entire levels below the current streets, filled with windows and doors that should not exist underground. In Paris, Vienna, and even New York, similar structures can be found. Were these buildings originally designed this way? Or were they survivors of a sudden global catastrophe that reset entire cities? Alongside mud floods came the Great Fires. In the 19th century alone, many of the world's major cities experienced devastating blazes. The Great Fire of Chicago in 1871, the fires of San Francisco, Moscow, and Toronto all destroyed vast portions of urban centers, erasing architecture that may have belonged to an earlier civilization. Historians often attribute these fires to accidents, but their frequency, scale, and timing suggest something more. Could they have been intentional, part of a systematic erasure of Tartarian cities? Another piece of this puzzle lies in the grand expositions of the 19th century.
Well, that's the theory. So I want you obviously to use your own critical thinking, but I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, we've seen that there's evidence that the Vikings were already in North America years before Columbus. We've seen evidence that the Knights Templar and earlier societies had secret handshakes that matched up with what Native Americans used as well. And so there is evidence that there really is no such thing as a Native American or a Native European. We were all part of the human race, and that we ultimately just populated. There could have been a continental drift. There could have been man-made disasters. But ultimately, even if you go back to ancient Sumer and you go back to Gobli Tekke, you'll see that the handbags that the Sumerians carried in their carvings, there's clearly more of a connection between humanity than we've been taught to think in the modern public school and college system. Let's go ahead and let this rip.
From Paris to Chicago, massive world fairs showcased breathtaking architecture, gleaming domes, sprawling palaces, and monumental halls. These buildings were said to be constructed in just a few years, often using temporary materials, only to be torn down immediately after the events. Yet, photographs of these expositions reveal buildings of such scale and craftsmanship that they rival anything we see today. Why would governments build cities of marble and stone only to destroy them within months? Perhaps they did not build them at all. Perhaps these expositions were staged to present old Tartarian architecture as newly built, before demolishing it to hide the truth. The Great Reset theory suggests that a global disaster, natural or man-made, wiped out much of Tartaria. Whether it was a mud flood, a technological weapon, or a natural cataclysm, the result was the same: cities buried, populations displaced, and knowledge lost. What remained was claimed by the rising empires of the modern age, who rewrote history to erase Tartaria's legacy. Consider the timing. The disappearance of Tartaria from maps coincides with the Industrial Revolution and the rapid expansion of...
And this is what I was talking about earlier, is that Tartaria wasn't just some imaginary thing. It was on maps. And then they were just slowly erased from history by world governments and so-called scientists and archaeologists. Very interesting.
Empires. It was during this period that standardized education systems were introduced, teaching new versions of history to entire generations. At the same time, architecture was rebranded as Victorian or neoclassical, regardless of its true origins. In just a few decades, an entire empire was erased not only from the earth, but from human memory. Skeptics dismiss the Great Reset as fantasy, pointing to natural disasters, wars, and urban development as explanations. But the sheer consistency of buried buildings, worldwide fires, and sudden architectural booms raises questions that cannot be easily ignored. Why do so many cities share the same anomalies? Why were so many grand structures destroyed rather than preserved? Why does the official story always demand we look away from the possibility of something greater? If Tartaria was truly wiped out in a Great Reset, it means our understanding of history is incomplete. It means humanity may have lived through cycles of civilizations rising and falling, with each reset burying the past deeper. The victors of each new age then rebuild the story, shaping it to their advantage. The Great Reset is not just about mud floods or lost architecture. It is about the fragility of memory. If an empire as vast as Tartaria could vanish in just a few generations, what else have we forgotten? What other resets might have shaped the world we live in today? The ruins, the maps, and the architecture whisper of a story far older and more complex than textbooks allow. And while the truth may remain hidden beneath layers of soil and silence, one thing is certain: civilizations do not simply vanish. They are erased, reset, and rewritten. And Tartaria may be the greatest example of all.
And I don't have any argument against that. I think that anytime we have civilizations, a warring faction, for example, that conquers another, I mean, we saw what happened with the Spanish invasion of the Americas. They erased the history of as much as they could. They destroyed things. The barbarian and Muslim invasions of Europe, they would destroy the churches. The Muslims would build temples right on top of all of the churches. They did the same thing with the Dome of the Rock in Israel. The Muslims are famous for doing that, building their religious buildings right on top of the other religious buildings of who they conquered, with the goal of destroying their history because they're the only one true religion, right? And we saw that with the barbarians invading Rome, destroying statues. So it makes perfectly good sense to me. Obviously, we need to explore this more in future shows, but I think there might be something there. What do you think? What do you think? I want to know what you think. Put it in the comments. What do you think? All right. So that was basically a little discussion about the mud flood, Rockefeller era reforms, and the erasure of history and medicine in the public education system. And so now we're going to get into the ancient alchemy in monoatomic gold, colloidal silver, and the arcs. And I know this is a little fringe, it's a little out there, but I still want to talk about it because I want to encourage you to do your own research. So I'm going to present deeper evidence from alchemical traditions rooted in ancient Egypt, Kemet, and earlier civilizations. Monoatomic gold. All right, let's talk about that. Ormus, or O-R-M-U-S. Let's talk about that. Hold on one second. Egyptians and later Templars used this superconductive substance for DNA repair, heightened consciousness, longevity, and spiritual elevation. Linked to manna, you know that word manna, like bread in the Bible? Well, it's the Templar view and the Gnostic view is different than the Roman Catholic Church view. And so there was a schism between the Templars and the Roman Catholic Church over a lot of these terms, where the Romans used more of a hermeneutic, what they believed to be the hermeneutic, which is basically what things meant at the time that they were said. For example, the Second Amendment, well-regulated militia. Well, modern-day Democrats say that means government regulation, but the historic definition of well-regulated means in well order or well-trained. It had nothing to do with the government. And the Roman Catholic Church had their version of manna. And since the Council of Nicaea, they removed the books of the Bible that had a different hermeneutic version of what they believed. And of course, the Templars didn't like that. And so I like to hear the other side, the other point of view, what the Templars have to think. And so they were using terms like manna in the Ark of the Covenant and stored as bread like loaves. Multiple arcs reportedly functioned as energy and healing devices using geometry, ether, and this technology. All right, now let's talk about colloidal silver. It was used continuously for over 6,000 years. Egyptians applied silver to wounds, 1850 BCE. The Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans, as well as Phoenicians, stored water in silver vessels because it's an antibacterial. All right. Macedonian warriors used silver plates on battle wounds to prevent gangrene. Before antibiotics, it safely treated infections, viruses, and fungi. But you're taught in the public schools and the colleges that until the creation of iodine, there was no way to treat these wounds. Well, the problem is in World War I, nobody had access to silver to treat this stuff. So iodine was a pretty amazing thing, and using that in World War II, it helped a lot. But again, colloidal silver is an option as well. So just something that you might want to think about. These frequency-based vital force modalities powered ancient healing temples and arcs, according to the Templars. The defense, in this case, the FDA and the CDC, will object that these are unproven ancient claims and hearsay. However, my response as the prosecutor is as follows. Your Honor, you should overrule that objection under the ancient documents exception under Texas Rules of Evidence 803 sub 16 and California Evidence Code section 1331 and learned treatises. Apply here, Your Honor. Ancient Egyptian papyri, alchemical texts, and archaeological records qualify for these exceptions. The defense must prove them untrustworthy, Your Honor, and they cannot. All right, so now let's get into what Tim Hogan has to say, and he is the current Grand Master of one of the chapters of the modern day Knights Templar, and I thought it would be interesting to hear what he has to say, because I do believe in allowing people to express themselves without just writing them off as a crazy or fringe. So let's hear what he's got to say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
To set up their headquarters,
correct,
under the dome.
Right. So this is the secret history.
Yes.
So like,
but this is why we're here. This is why.
Right. So while they're supposed to be protecting pilgrims,
right,
what they're really doing is they're digging, right, and they're doing archaeological excavation under the Temple Mount, and they're going into East Jerusalem, and they're opening up tombs and finding artifacts, and they're bringing this stuff secretly back to Europe. And then they're also going into places like Egypt, where they set up their grand commandery at the Temple of Isis at Philae.
Mm-hmm.
And from there they're going into places like the Temple of Hathor, Dendera, and Hatshepsut's temple, in the Valley of the Kings, and in Karnak, and they leave these Templar markers at all these places, and they leave Templar graffiti at all these places as well. And they're finding artifacts, including arks, like the Ark of the Covenant.
You said arks.
Arks,
so
plural.
Plural arks.
Yeah, so they found 6 arks. But there was probably 100 arks in antiquity. Every temple in Egypt had one of these arks, and you can see it on the temple walls when you know what to look for.
So if there were 100 arks on Earth, then how the arks are described in the Bible is incorrect?
Well, they were electrostatic capacitors, and they would be set up at certain node points around the planet, and then the electricity would build up, and it would just broadcast within the region.
And let me set up for those listening. If you take acacia wood and put gold on either side of it, you create a dielectric, which does transfer electricity.
That's exactly.
And that's pretty interesting. I mean, to me, I want to know more about this, and I've reached out to Timothy Hogan to try to get an interview. If any of you are subscribers to Timothy Hogan's channel, I did place links to the videos in the description. I definitely want to learn more about this, but it's interesting that acacia wood, these things that are mentioned in the Bible, if you, just like what he said, they can be used to help, I guess, transmit electrical frequencies. That blows my mind. So we don't have a whole lot of time to get into the whole video, but let's get into the next one, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and let Timothy Hogan talk a little bit more about the Philosopher's Stone and alchemy.
And the only way to get to heaven is through them.
Right,
which is good business.
Sure.
Right? I mean, and they'll also have you believe that it doesn't matter what sins you commit, but if you believe in Jesus, you do the crime, Jesus will do the time.
That's right.
So you can still get to heaven. Whereas the Gnostics said, no, you are personally responsible for your own salvation, and your salvation comes from awakening. And that part of that awakening is to your own personal responsibility. So you do the crime.
And how many of you disagree with that you need to be personally responsible? And although I do believe that all of your sins are forgiven through the sacrifice of Jesus, because that's the way I was taught growing up, to me, being a Marine and being someone who believes in personal accountability, it's really hard to argue that if you use as a crutch your salvation to continue engaging in things that go against natural law, that you should face punishment for that. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that, or give me a bunch of twos if you disagree.
You know, you do the penance to make up for the crime.
Last question. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
From what I understand, to be a Mason in your 32nd degree,
Correct.
to be initiated, you need to believe in a higher power.
Correct.
Do you?
Absolutely. 100%. I believe in God, or source, or Allah, or
The
whatever you
universe,
want to call it.
The great source.
The great source, the origin. And from a Gnostic, I consider myself a Gnostic. We believe that the supreme God comes from a realm of light that is beyond this matter.
Right, and that's the problem a lot of modern Christians have with the Templars and the Masons, is that at the highest level of Masonry, Lucifer is light. And so that's a problem that I have with the Masons. And I don't know, the Templars probably believe the same thing, because I don't believe that Lucifer is light. I believe he's evil. And that's the way most of the people on my channel believe. However, I also have to credit the Masons and the Templars with sort of being the harbingers of natural law, which is our rights come from God and therefore they can't be taken away from the government, which is something that I think we need to explore further. Now, so let's move on. Let's move on, because now I'm getting kind of burned out. I don't know how long we've been going, guys, but I'm pretty tired. But hopefully you guys like the show so far. I mean, do you like the format that I'm doing? You know, putting pharma on trial as opposed to just regurgitating facts and information. I'm trying to sort of give it a little bit of a legal twist, because after all, I've been practicing law for over 20 years. So I think I'm pretty good at it. I externed for an appellate justice, and I've recovered at least $200 million for my clients. So I think that I'm pretty good at it, but you guys tell me. By the way, anybody who wants to throw me some memberships or a super chat, I'll put your questions to the head of the line. I got to do that. I've got to make that statement because I do have a wife, and she doesn't like it when I spend all this time doing YouTube videos when I could be providing for the family. But at the same token, I feel like it's my duty to use my higher knowledge to be able to share things with people, to encourage them to become critical thinkers and escape the college and public education system back into a classical education-based model, and to homeschool your kids. There's no excuse for you not homeschooling your kids. And if you reach out to me, I can help you set up a curriculum to do just that. So let's talk about the enforcement machine, all right? The enforcement machine, the thought police, the AMA, the FDA, insurance, and cultural conditioning. The AMA, funded by Rockefeller interests around 1922, became the enforcer, revoking licenses of natural practitioners and controlling journals via pharma advertising. Whenever you have an argument with a college kid, they'll always, oh, the medical journal doesn't say that. Oh, you don't have a medical degree. It's like arguing with someone about economics who went to college. I have a degree in economics. Yeah, they have a degree in Keynesian economics, all right? Keynesian economics is the economic system taught by the Federal Reserve bankers. Me being an Austrian economist, understanding that all fiat currency will return to its intrinsic value, which is zero, and being a gold and silver stacker, it's like talking to someone who's in a Star Trek movie, like college educated people or the Borg. It's impossible to have a discussion with them about anything, because to them, unless you have a degree from a government approved school, you're not qualified. If it doesn't come from a medical journal that was paid for by pharmaceutical companies, it's clearly not medicine. And this is exactly what happened with Rockefeller and the Carnegies and how they took over medicine. So, Space Miner says, I'd love to see a series on history and mystery on trial. Dude, shoot me over an email and I'll see what I can do for you. It's hard for me to do these shows all the time. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I get burned out. So I can't be like Mario and International Stacker, where I have scheduled shows all the time. It's like I go live whenever I can, and I hope you guys give me a pass for that. But when I do these shows, please share them with your friends and press that save button. Like, subscribe, and most importantly, there's a little save thing that looks like a little ribbon. Save these videos for later viewing. That's one of the biggest algorithmic boosts you can give to my channel. Besides subscribing to the Market Sniper and Mineko 64, the best thing that you could do to help yourself as well as my channel is to save these videos for later viewing. So the AMA funded by Rockefeller interests around 1922 became the enforcer, okay? They revoked the licenses of natural practitioners and they controlled medicine via medical journals and pharma advertising. Insurance paid for drugs, not nutrition. So your insurance won't pay for a nutrition program. Natural approaches were relabeled alternative. And that's why I wanted to talk about Tartaria, right? Because Tartaria was just removed from maps, even though it was on ancient maps. Now it's gone, right? Governments removed Tartaria, just like pharmaceutical companies relabeled alternative as being quackery. Even they relabeled natural medicine as alternative and quackery, when in reality, it's petroleum-based medicine, which is alternative. Why? Because these pharmaceutical companies could take petroleum waste products, synthesize them into modern medicine, and then patent it. And then they can make billions of dollars off these patents. And that's the goal, according to many experts and critical thinkers. So the paradigm shifted to symptom suppression with patentable chemicals. And that's really what it's all about. That's really what it's all about. So let's get into the legacy, the Rockefeller legacy of replacing medicine with petroleum.
Financially, the AMA received substantial Rockefeller funding in 1922. In return, it aggressively policed medical practice. Doctors using natural remedies or non-pharmaceutical treatments faced license suspension. The AMA published lists of unapproved treatments and threatened sanctions against physicians who ignored them. Medical journals, many funded by pharmaceutical advertising, refused to publish research on natural therapies. Enforcement was sophisticated. The AMA established a department specifically targeting physicians using natural methods. Doctors found guilty faced public censure, loss of hospital privileges, and license revocation. Insurance companies structured reimbursement to favor pharmaceuticals. Counseling on nutrition couldn't be billed, but prescribing a drug generated a billable visit. Financial incentives pushed doctors toward drugs, even when natural approaches might have been more effective. By 1940, the transformation was complete. An entire generation of doctors trained exclusively in drug-based medicine. Older physicians who remembered botanical treatments were retiring. Herbal pharmacies were replaced by drugstores stocked with Rockefeller-backed pharmaceuticals. The public was conditioned to equate modern medicine with synthetic compounds. Natural healing was rebranded as alternative medicine, implying it was secondary, unproven, and potentially dangerous. The results were profitable beyond imagination. The pharmaceutical industry grew from a minor sector into one of the largest economic forces in America. By 1950, drug company revenues exceeded $5 billion annually. Today,
and there you go. So when you hear all these people whining about affordable health care, well, we had affordable health care. We had affordable health care before the Rockefellers took over. But with billions of dollars in patents and medicine costing you thousands of dollars for the most cutting edge new thing that they've synthesized from petroleum, it's not affordable. So that helped actually encourage the growth of the insurance industry, the further fleecing and stripping away of your and my assets. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I think that the evidence shows that. What do you think? So let's go ahead and close it out. The closing legacy here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is members of the jury, the prosecution rests. The defense has offered authority instead of rebutting the primary documents. Had Dr. Benjamin Rush's call to action for medical freedom been heeded, this entire monopoly would have been declared unconstitutional from the very beginning. Dr. Benjamin Rush, the evidence shows, was correct. So I'm going to go ahead and issue you your final jury instructions. You must decide beyond a reasonable doubt if after considering all of the evidence, you have an abiding conviction of the truth of these charges, that this was a deliberate, profit-driven criminal enterprise to destroy natural healing, enforcing central control, and erode private property rights, your verdict must be guilty. Verdict. The people have proven beyond a reasonable doubt, again, that there was deliberate takeover that buried humanity's healing birthright. Reclaim critical thinking. Study the primary sources. Natural law upholds bodily autonomy and informed consent. So go ahead, guys, subscribe, drop your verdict in the live chat. I want to see guilty or not guilty. And, share the exhibits and sources that I provided in the description to your friends and family. This is an educational history and natural law analysis, not medical advice. Always consult licensed professionals. Court is adjourned. God bless you and stay sovereign. So I'll stick around for a couple of questions, but I want to poll the jury. So I want to see what the jury. So after we do a jury trial, what we'll do, once the jury is dismissed, we'll ask for a jury poll. And it's not mandatory that the jury be polled, but oftentimes they'll say why they ruled or found the way they did on the evidence and the law. And sometimes you'll find that the way that they found was ridiculous and didn't make any sense. So it's always interesting to hear what they have to say. Hey, Mias, good seeing you. Mias Tarot, give me a bunch of ones for Mias. I really like Mias. Mias is definitely her own woman. And one of the beautiful things about natural law and about my philosophy is I don't expect you to agree with me on everything. I just want you to believe that your rights came from your creator, not from the government. And if we have that same philosophy, we can form parallel systems and make the world a better place. The less we think alike, the better we are as humanity. The more we have critical thinking and the more we think for ourselves, the better. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. My goal here isn't to try to prove that I'm better than you, that I'm smarter than you. I was given a gift, the ability to be a good attorney, to be a good debater, and you have other gifts that you have that God gave you. And I want you to develop those skills and gifts to the best of your abilities to make America and ultimately the world a better place through decentralization and local control. That's how we do it. We do it at the base level. We do it starting with our families, by homeschooling our children, by getting them away from the Marxist-run education system. We teach that central control is evil, that groupthink is evil, and that's where I'm at. Yeah, independent thought, Mias, that's the way to go. You're right, Jody. Jody says guilty. Jody says guilty. So I've got a verdict of guilty here, guys. It looks like everyone's guilty and we win. Hold on, let me see if I can get myself. I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the screen. We don't need it anymore. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Mia says, exactly, I was thinking about mountain lions. We have them in Sacramento. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you got to love your country. That's right. You can't hate your country. I mean, they teach you to hate white people and hate your country and the school system, critical race theory, anything that the bankers and the government can do to divide us as human beings and to always have a fringe group. Oh, you stole this land. You can't be illegal on stolen land. It's just all stupid. We're all human beings. This whole world is ours. It doesn't belong to any one group, but we need to also live in harmony with each other as nature has done. And I think that that's one of the messages that I want to teach people on my show. And Michael's right. There's always going to be someone smarter than you. And I don't consider myself to be any kind of a genius. I'm just a critical thinker. I would always get into fist fights in school. I never believed anything my teachers said. I would be considered a fringe, crazy person by most government employees and government agencies because of the fact that I don't just piecemeal believe what anyone tells me. I believe that you need to do your own research. And that's why I want to give you guys information so you can at least form a basis opinion on what I've shared with you. And you can come up with your own conclusions and share them back with me. And if you think that I've made a mistake or I screwed up, just like Hawkaloogie did the other day, I had posted something on my community page that was not factual that I borrowed from X. And the guy unsubscribed from me and said, look, dude, I'm not going to be subscribing to someone who shares misinformation. And I agreed with him and I deleted the post, because that's right. We don't want to share misinformation, but we do want to share opinions, conclusions, and deductions with other people. So that's what we need to do, in my opinion. I definitely think that Javier Becerra is, pharmaceutical top dog. I think that all these guys in California, the single party communist style government that they have there, where they import homeless people there and set up nonprofits to end homelessness, but they bring them in from other states to get more taxpayer funding to pay off the administrators of these nonprofits who are their best friends. We just saw Gavin Newsom veto a bill that would have allowed us to go further into all this corruption with these non-governmental organizations, these nonprofits that Newsom and his single party state friends have been setting up to enrich themselves, their friends, and their family members. That all needs to stop, guys. That's crazy. I don't, Mias, who are you going to vote for governor of California? I know there's this one guy who's running for mayor in Los Angeles who's exposing that Marxist communist who allowed the reservoirs to stay empty so the Palisades could be burned down, and then conveniently left the country during the fires. Yeah, I think we need to look more into what's going on here. They want to create their 15-minute cities. And if you look at what they've done in communist China, as soon as you leave or enter that 15-minute city apartment building, you have to go through a biometric scan, and the government can decide whether or not they'll let you in or out of the building. They want you to have a social credit score. If you say anything that goes against big pharma, like we saw during COVID, or any of these other so-called natural disasters, they'll use that to decrease your social credit score and deny you access to your bank account. So it's another form of censorship. It goes against everything our founding fathers stood for. Okay, Mia says that she thinks Becerra is a good candidate. I'm going to take a look. We escaped Communist-fornia. We realized that the bankers and the big corporations control everything now, and that when you veto bills that deny the people to enforce government accountability, you know that you have absolute corruption. So anyways, if anybody doesn't have any questions, I hope that you enjoyed the show today. I definitely appreciate you joining me. I know I don't go live as much as I need to, but that is because I am a full-time practicing attorney. And so it's really difficult for me to do these shows, but I do them when I can on the fly. So make sure to like and subscribe, guys, and save these videos for later viewing. Make sure to purchase the paid subscriptions so I can do back channel shows that might get me banned on a regular public live. Space Miner, it was really good seeing you. Mias, as always, it was an honor to have you on the show today. Michael Wilbur, thank you for joining me. Space Miner, as always. Immortal Stan gives me a guilty vote. It looks like I won today. It looks like I won the trial against Big Pharma. Cheryl Clark votes guilty. Silver Spurs votes guilty. Let's see who else we have here. Mustard and Biscuits gave me a big fist bump. So yeah. And then I have Flatlander 50088 saying that he thinks that giants built these cities and stuff. That might be true. I guess we'll never know because history is concealed from us by the government. Selwyn, thank you for joining me today. There's a lot of other people that I need to thank. Looks like we had a pretty decent show today. With that being said, guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. Semper Fi, do or die.